Hi, I'm Arnie Gunderson from Fairwinds, and it's been a little more than a week since our last video. The video computer we used had a meltdown, and I'm sorry that kind of set back our production schedule a little bit here. However, I'd like to thank you, those of you who donated. We were able to go out and get a better computer, and hopefully these productions will be up and running again permanently. Thanks again. Today I wanted to talk about the lessons that can be learned worldwide for the operating nuclear reactors that are already done and in use, not under construction. The first and most obvious thing is the containment. Containments were made to contain radioactivity. The vents you hear about and how they failed were an add-on. Back in the 70s and 80s, when these plants were designed, they weren't designed to have a vent. As a matter of fact, the pressurized water reactors around the world don't have a vent even now. So these containment vents were a Band-Aid fix to a problem that was identified after they were built. Now, the vents have been tested 3 times, at Fukushima 1, Fukushima 2, Fukushima 3, and they failed 3 times. That's a 100% failure rate. That's an indication that this design is seriously flawed, and it can happen here. It can happen in Germany, where they also have this type of reactor, and at the other BWR reactors around the world. So first and foremost, the vent system that's on every boiling water reactor needs to be evaluated to see if it can be made better or it should be eliminated. And if it's eliminated, what should we do about the containment that can't withstand the pressures of an accident? Vents can also cause problems. For instance, here in Vermont, the reactor is designed to be pressurized after an accident to push water into it. Well, if they open the vent and it stays open, they'll lose that pressure and they won't be able to cool the reactor. So we can have a meltdown. That doesn't apply just here. That applies at Dresden, it applies at H.B. Robinson, and other plants. The NRC allowed this to happen. They allowed utilities to take credit for the containment pressure to push the water to the pumps. There's regulations on the book prohibiting that, but the NRC waived those regulations when they increased the power at Dresden and Vermont Yankee, Robinson, and some others. So it's important to remember that vents were designed to prevent a problem, overpressure of the containment, but now they can actually create a problem if, when they're open, they don't close. And if you take a look at Fukushima, it's hard to believe that you can guarantee those valves will close after an accident. Well, I've been on the NRC's case about containment leakage for a long time. At Beaver Valley, there was a hole in the side of the containment. I brought that to their attention several years ago. The full report's on the website. At Fitzpatrick, there was a crack in the side of the containment. I brought that to the NRC's attention last year. And at Millstone, it has the smallest containment for the power output of any of that type of reactor in the world. I brought that to the NRC's attention about 2 years ago, and they actually said for Millstone that they don't have the capability to analyze containments. It's in the notes. Yet, the NRC still assumes that containments will not leak. They've actually said that in an advisory committee to reactor safeguards meeting back in October of last year. So we've got a containment that doesn't contain a regulator who doesn't have the capability to regulate, and an industry with a series of cracks and holes in containments that continues to believe there's 0 probability of a containment leak. Well, moving on, I wanted to talk about seismic criteria. That's earthquake resistance. We now know that Fukushima 1 failed because of the earthquake, not the tsunami. It was leaking and in the middle of a meltdown before the tsunami even hit. We also know from another report that's on the website by Siemens that Unit 4's fuel pool cracked from the earthquake, not from the tsunami. Well, what that means is that the codes we use to analyze these plants are flawed. They shouldn't crack, they shouldn't break. This wasn't at Fukushima that big an earthquake. It was out at sea at 9, but by the time it got to Fukushima, they should have been able to ride out that storm, at least the seismic issues of it. Well, what that says is that what we've been relying on in analyzing these plants may not be working. 2 out of the 4 plants developed cracks from an earthquake, and they should have been able to just to get through those. In the U.S. reactors, we've got another reactor down at Crystal River in Florida that developed a 60-foot long crack in the containment when they cut a hole in it to replace the steam generator. Well, what that means is that this was the most analyzed containment in history, and they still never saw that crack coming. Well, they tried to fix it and spent 2 years on the repair, and as they were ready to run again, they found another crack had grown in a different direction. We clearly don't have the seismic code capability to analyze these massive structures. Crystal River proves it here in the States, and Fukushima proves it around the world. A couple other ones that are really obvious are the batteries. There's not enough of them. The longest lived batteries in a American plant are 8 hours, but most are only 4. We could not ride out a loss of power accident like Fukushima. In fact, it would be worse. The other thing is the tidal surge. Now, Fukushima had a tsunami, and they were designed for a 6 or 7 meter tsunami around 20 feet, and in fact, the tsunami was 15 meters. At the California plants, San Onofre, they're designed for a 30-foot tsunami. But yet we know there was a 45-foot tsunami in Japan. So we need to take a look at these tidal surges that can wipe out, maybe not the diesels, but the pumps that pump the water to the diesels. On the East Coast, you got Florida and the tidal surge from an earthquake, from a hurricane. And what that means is that the hurricane can push an enormous wall of water inland. And for instance, the Turkey Point plants can get inundated by the flood from that tidal surge. We need to look at these events that right now we've said are impossible in light of what proved to be possible at Fukushima. Well, 2 more things. The first is emergency planning. In the United States, we analyze for 10 miles out, and there's really no basis in science for 10 miles. Basically, we didn't know which way the wind was going to blow, so we put a 10-mile circle around the plant. We said everybody's got to be able to get out of here within a couple hours. But Fukushima showed us that the accident continues for weeks, and it goes with a meandering plume deep inland. We are not prepared for an evacuation that would be 50 miles away. Fukushima's already contaminated out beyond 50 miles. There's some plants like the Dresden units in Illinois and the Indian Point units in New York State that have major cities, Chicago and New York, within that zone. We really need to take a look at siting of nuclear plants and real emergency plans in place of the paper plans we have in place. Well, the last thing is multi-unit sites. And Fukushima showed us that if one unit blows up, it can impede your ability to solve a problem on other units. And here we've got, for instance, Palo Verde out in Arizona rather, and they have 3 units on one site, and just 2 weeks ago the NRC gave them a 20-year license extension. Well, how could they possibly have analyzed the results of Fukushima and come to an adequate analysis of a multi-unit site? Well, that's a technical wrap-up. There's one more political issue, and it's Price-Anderson. Price-Anderson is the insurance program that utilities have in place. In the event of an accident, all of the reactors in the country pony up about $100 million apiece, and there's a $10 billion cap on their liability in the event of an accident. Fukushima is going to be around $200 billion. If it happens here, what does that mean? That means that you and I, as taxpayers, shoulder the rest of that. We're on the hook for $190 billion in the event of this. And that's what Price-Anderson is. I think in light of Fukushima, we should evaluate whether or not it's right to give these reactors a free ride on their insurance. Well, that's all for now. Thank you very much.